Alright, now if you see, we got a few hairs that are actually in the bleaching solution. Now that's okay because you can actually go ahead and just put those out if they do get bleached. But for the most part, everything is combed back, everything is out of the way, and that's what we wanted. So I'm going to go ahead and let this bleach. I'm going to start off in 10 minutes, check it. It's pretty cold in here. Just make sure that when you are bleaching hair, you do take note of the temperature in your home or wherever you're doing this, because that can affect the bleaching time. So I'm going to just start off with 10 minutes, check it every 10 minutes after that, and then see where we are, and I'll be back. Alright, so here we are at the 10-minute mark. Let's see. What we're giving. Yes, honey, bleach them knots. Look at that. Look at that. I'm gonna let it go a little bit longer and I'll check back in. Alright, so let's check it out. Alright, so those are pretty much how I want those to be. So I'm gonna go ahead and wash those out with these purple Shimmer Light shampoo, and then we'll be back. Alright, so I just rinsed out the closure, and this is what we have. Just bleach the knots on it. This is what we're looking like in the back. And go ahead and part her off. Now I'll probably need to go ahead and fix that, but it's not a really big problem. Alright, and again, this is just your standard, lace, so it's nothing too special, but we're gonna make it fancy, alright? So there's a lace closure, so we'll go ahead and get this sewn onto our cap. Alright, so here's my mannequin head. If this is a 22-inch circumference mannequin head from GEX, I'm gonna go ahead and use this wig cap. This is the stretch mesh dome style wig cap in cute fit in black. Right. Here's the cap. I'm gonna go ahead and put it on our mannequin. And I personally like to have this V part. You can't really tell on camera, but there's a V back here. V, and it comes down. I like to put this toward the back. So let's go ahead and do that now. And I like to line up the front of my cap with this line here. So we'll go ahead and do that. And once I get it lined up, I like to pin it. Right, and then we'll go ahead and move on to the back. Go ahead and pull this down. And now I have these measuring tapes back here. I got this from Stylish Styles by T on YouTube. I used her canvas blockhead measuring system. I love it so far. So I am going to block this off. We'll maybe do about 4 inches in the nape. And I'll do that and I'll come back and show you what it looks like. Okay, so I went ahead and struggled and fought with this. But I finally got it somewhat straightened. So I have it, I think this is about 5 inches across for the nape. I got it T-pinned, and then I'll turn it around here. Here is my starting line, 9 inches from the base up here, and then here are the temples. If I was doing a frontal, then that would be gaps in the cap here, I'm gonna go ahead and put on my closure, and then we'll go ahead and start drawing the guidelines. All right, here is our closure. Still drying. I just rinsed out the bleach and used some Shimmer Lights purple shampoo. And this is what we're looking like. So I'm gonna go ahead and put it on this closure here. Let's do that now. So now we're going to go ahead and take this metallic Sharpie and we're going to outline our closure. So it's up to you if you want to remove your closure or if you want to just go ahead and sew it on. More than likely, I may go ahead and sew it on, but before I even think about that, I'm going to go ahead and draw my guidelines with the same Sharpie. So now we're going to draw our guidelines. Now this you can probably freehand, unless you have your own made up template or you found one online or whatever. But since I only have 2 bundles, I'm going to make them maybe 2 finger widths apart. And I'm thinking about what I'm going to do, because normally when you get around this area, this is where you start having issues with the spacing, because the crown of the head is not shaped, you know, like the rest of the head. It's not completely circular. So you have to try to make your lines as neat as possible, but also take that into consideration. So I think my first line is going to start maybe about here above the band line, only because if you're going to put in a comb, you're going to put in a wig tag, you're going to want to have space to do that, and normally that's going to go in about here, but in the back of the cap. So I normally like to start my line somewhere about here, and then just go up every 2 and make another line, and then, you know, every 2 and make another line. But this is only because I have 2 bundles, and I'm also doubling those wefts. Now if I had 3 or 4 bundles, I would still double those wefts, but I would probably make these lines a little bit closer together. So I'm going to go ahead, make these lines, and I'll be back. Keep in mind, your lines do not have to be perfect. Again, we're all still learning. Most of us are learning from each other. So just, you know, do what you can do. If you need to use a ruler, if you need to use, I can talk. It's kind of hard to draw on this thing. If you need to use a measuring tape, anything to help you get it, you know, keep it neat all the way across, you can do that. I'm just going to freehand it. Now, if I wasn't doing this on camera and I was just holding this, it'd be a lot easier, but you know, we're gonna make it do what it do. So just keep doing your lines all the way across, all the way to the end. And again, these don't have to be perfect, these are just guidelines, okay? So I'm gonna keep going all the way to the top till we get to the closure, and then I'll be back. And my last one is going to be around this closure, but let me show you something. One thing here is I messed up. I noticed that my line coming down this way was crooked. So what I did was I went ahead and just made a follow-up guideline, and I know that when I get to this part, I'm going to go ahead and follow that instead of the one that I initially made. Also, when I got to the crown area here, I made sure that I curved the line and stopping here, instead of going all the way across, because we're going to need to fill in this gap area, and if I would have brung this line all the way across, I wouldn't have had enough, space in here to do that. So I went ahead and just made this line across here, stopped it here. So my next track is going to start here, and it's going to come all the way around. It's going to cover the space that we have in between this track, this track, this track. Hopefully that makes sense. If not, I'll try to explain it a little bit better once you see me constructing the wig. But as you can see here on the other side, I have a line that goes all the way across, and then I have a line here that stops, and then I have another line that comes all the way around. But the track that's here is going to cover what space will be here, okay? So now it's time to sew on our closure and get our track laid on this cap, and we will have ourselves a fully constructed wig. I'm going to try to show you as much as I can. It's kind of hard to do, but we'll see what we get. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and start stitching our closure along this line here. Alright, so let's go ahead, and I like to go underneath the skin of the band of the cap. This right here, this black part here, is the band of the cap. I don't like to go all the way through because that can sometimes mess up the elasticity, so I like to go through the band and then go through the band of the closure. Pull it through. And y'all, please excuse my nails. I need to feel so bad. Now, as you can see, I thought I made a knot in that, but I didn't. So I'm just gonna make another knot. Try that one more again. Alright, through the skin of the cap. There we go. Now for extra security, you can go ahead and you see how there is space in between these two pieces. You can go ahead and take your needle, stick it through there, pull it. When you pull it, it'll create a self-locking knot. See that? And it's secured. So make sure that when you do that, it's called lock stitch. So I'm going to show you again. I'm going to go through skin, cap, go through the closure. Okay, now we're gonna go through both pieces. See that? Got 1 and 2. So we're gonna take the needle. It's sometimes easier to just do that. Or you can pull the needle all the way through whatever it is you're sewing and just stick it between the two. I told y'all it's hard to do this with this angle. And if you see it starting to, tangle up like that, just pull it apart. But as you can see, once you start to pull it, it'll create its own lock. And I think some of the other part got in there, but that's okay. And I'm just gonna go ahead and make sure I stitch all the way across, very close, very neat. And once I get done with that, I'll be back and show you the finished result. it is neat enough for what we're going to do, because we're also going to reinforce it when we sew on our last track, you know, around the closure. So we got that stitched on, so now we're going to start working on sewing on our tracks, and we're going to do that with our sewing machine here. So let's get started doing that. Presser foot. I'm gonna go ahead and turn my machine on. Okay. And y'all, this part can take a minute, especially if you're a beginner, so don't rush it. Just, you know, make sure you try to get it aligned perfectly, get it in there correctly. Pain in the butt to have to do this multiple times or get your stuff jammed in there, or you know. So once it's aligned like you want it to be, go ahead and start. Now you see how there's a thick piece in here. I don't know if y'all can see that. It's kind of thick and bulky right here. So what I'm gonna have to do is pull this up, push, and pull the needle up also. Realign it, get it underneath the presser foot, and try again. Okay, now there we go. Everything is trial and error. And make sure once you get those initial stitches that you backstitch. And continue forward stitching. You can do this a couple times. It's up to you. I like to do it maybe 2 or 3 times. We're still having that problem, so we're just gonna push that down in there and make sure we're aligned. Make sure you're never stretching the cap like this. Make sure that you're spreading it, and make sure that it's flat enough, but never pull it and tug it and pull it, you know, taut, because that's going to shrink your cap. So just make sure it's flat, make sure everything's aligned, and then just continue following your guideline. Once you do the beginning and end of each track, you're going to backstitch. And that's to lock in your stitching. Alright, and there we go. It's connected. I'm going to go ahead and clip everything. Track is on our cap. Look at that stitching. Alright, now we're just gonna continue following our guidelines and adding our tracks. So it looks like we may have a problem with our machine. Got some hair caught around it in there, and if that's the case, you just pull it out. And you just keep going. Keep following that guideline we got right there. Make sure you see how that's tucked right there, that hair. Always make sure you pull it out, because if you get that caught underneath in one of these stitches, it's gonna be a pain in the butt to get out. So just make sure you're not stitching over anything that's not necessarily needs to be stitched. Keep following that guideline. Please watch your fingers, because you do not want to stitch your fingers. We're almost to the end. Now back stitch. Presser foot and remove. Now this top thread, you're always going to have two threads. This is the bottom thread, which is the bobbin thread, and then this is the top thread here. You're always going to take this top thread and put it underneath your presser foot and bring them to the back once you start stitching. Let's cut this off here. And there is our second stitching, and you see how they're spaced apart, but we still have some elasticity in there, and that's what we want. Now you see what I mentioned earlier about keeping the space here in the band. This is where your wig tag can go. This is where your combs can go. You can also, you're gonna have space up here on the other side of the band, like up towards the top, so this is where you can put your elastic bands. And this is why I like these caps, because no matter, you know, how much you stitch, you're still going to have some elasticity, so it's going to fit really snug. Alright, so we're just going to keep going until we get up to the top, and I'll be back. Alright, so we are at the last part. We are now closing up our wig. This is the last track. I'm stitching right next to our closure, so I'm going to let you watch me do that. Here's our last track. Here is our closure. Go ahead and stitch those. Repositioning, you gotta get in there and do it. Just do it. You know what, that little piece of hair is stuck right there. I'm just gonna move that out the way. Alright. Last section. Be. y'all, not all of y'all, my bad, for y'all can see the stitching. Here's the closure, here are the bundles. And let's go ahead and flip it inside out. And here is the stitching. Neat.